All right. So in this second half of the muscular PowerPoint, the second half of the screencast, we're going to be going over a couple different diseases of the human muscular system, starting with rigor mortis. Okay, rigor mortis is what happens after we experience death. In rigor mortis, the body's joints and muscles become more and more locked into place. They become completely stiff. The reason for this is that when we die, we no longer have the ability to keep our cells alive. The cells can no longer make ATP. And ATP, if we look at this diagram right here, is required in order to do a muscle contraction. This is called the power stroke right here. And if we cannot have ATP, we can't contract our muscles, all right? We also can't relax our muscles. So in rigor mortis, the body gets very, very stiff, meaning the muscles get frozen into place the way that they are. So normally the actin and the myosin would contract, but in rigor mortis, no ATP is available, so that actin and myosin becomes locked into place. All right, the second condition we'll talk about is tetanus. And tetanus is no joke, guys. Thankfully, we have this thing called a tetanus shot that we can administer if you do have some sort of skin breakage where you step on a nail or you're outside in the dirt a lot. You can get a tetanus shot to protect yourself. But essentially, tetanus is found in a bacteria that is naturally occurring in the dirt and in the soil. It's also naturally occurring in like dirty metal things that have become rusted and corroded. Bacteria is usually found there too. And tetanus is caused by this enzyme called cholinesterase to not break down acetylcholine at the synapse. So let me explain what that means. Normally, in a normal muscle contraction, when we are finished with a contraction, we have a second neuron that releases this thing called glycine. And glycine is kind of like turning off the muscle. It says, all right, we've picked up the water bottle, we've done whatever motion we need to, now we need to stop. So that glycine is going to block the release of acetylcholine, and it's going to result in that muscle being able to extend and relax. With tetanus, which is again the toxin released by this bacteria, the tetanus will actually block glycine. So glycine won't be able to be released. Therefore, the neuron is going to just continue to fire and continue to tell that muscle to contract. Tetanus is extremely irreversible, meaning once your muscles have contracted, there is no cure to make them relax again, and it is fatal. There's no cure. So it's really a horrible, horrible condition, and a lot of people take it for granted that we have this shot that protects us against it. That if you were in a location where you couldn't get that shot quick enough, tetanus is a pretty serious condition. All right, what is not a serious condition is a condition that is affecting these goats. And I just realized that I don't think that we are getting any sound here. Let me figure this out. So I think I realized that we might not be able to hear the sound in this video. So I think what I'll do is just kind of show you. The condition that we're talking about now is called myotonia. So this is a condition where when an animal is startled, they actually involuntarily contract all their muscles and they fall over. So you can see in the video, they are literally fainting. So this is a genetic condition, actually. seen in goats, and it can also be rarely found in humans. Fun little facts, shepherds used to actually seek out these goats that have myotonia congenita. And the reason they would do that would be to put them with the rest of their flock of sheep. And if a wolf would ever come out and try to attack the herd of sheep, the wolf would scare this goat, the wolf would get the goat, and it would leave the remainder of the pack alone, which is kind of horrible, but true. All right, so the fourth condition is a condition called myasthenia gravis. And myasthenia gravis is going to mean grave muscular weakness. So you can kind of see in this image here, these are some characteristic telltale signs of this condition. The muscles in the face, and we have lots of muscles in the face, get very weak with this condition. It also will blur vision, blur speech, and eventually it will lead to difficulties swallowing. The reason for this disease is that it's actually an autoimmune disease. When your body starts attacking the receptors for acetylcholine, it means that your muscle cannot contract. So that's the reason why these muscles in the face, when there's acetylcholine receptors are damaged, they can no longer contract, so they just kind of slump down and they are more relaxed. All right. Fifth condition is called muscular dystrophy. This is a really, really kind of tragic disease, and I'm sure you've probably heard of different fundraisers that will go into muscular dystrophy research. So muscular dystrophy starts at a really young age, typically. It presents usually between 1 and 2 years of age. And unfortunately, progressively, as that child gets older and older, it gets worse and worse. This is a sex-linked trait, so it's a genetic trait, which if you remember anything about like freshman year biology, sex-linked traits are found more commonly in males because they have only one X chromosome. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy is one of the categories of muscular dystrophy, and it's categorized by a child not being able to stand upright, all right? They lose a lot of the muscular strength in their back, so you can see this is an 8-year-old with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and they struggle to walk upright, they struggle to balance, all of those muscles that go into holding our torso upright and to walk, those are the muscles that start to break down. And you can see as they get to be this old, it gets harder and harder for them to even do stuff like to get off of the ground, all right, which is kind of very, very sad. All right, so there's another little case study about somebody with muscular dystrophy, but we're going to leave that for another time. All right. Again, I found another little video that talks about some gene therapy options that right now are on the cutting edge of treating this. Again, since muscular dystrophy is genetic, a lot of times the only cure for a genetic disease would be to fix the root of it, which would be in the genes themselves. So we'll save that one for, if you're interested, you can go back and watch that. So the next condition we're going to talk about is ALS. So this is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. ALS, you might have remembered a couple of years ago, there's this thing called the water or the ice bucket challenge for ALS. This is another degenerative disease where over time it will weaken muscles, but ALS actually affects the motor nerves that connect to them. So it basically means that even though those nerves are connected, there's no movement, there's no nourishment, there's no contraction of that muscle. So because it can't contract, it will eventually start breaking down and it becomes atrophied. So somebody with ALS might be completely normal earlier in their life, but as they get older and older, usually within the period of a couple years, they will actually lose that. They will lose that muscle movement and become paralyzed. Eventually, the last muscle to give up would be their heart and their lungs, and that's usually the cause of their death. So we've talked about conditions of the muscular system. The next couple things we'll talk about are poisons that affect the muscular system. I always think this is kind of interesting. There is a bacteria caused by Clostridium botulinum, and this bacteria causes botulism. So you might have heard of botulism if you are eating canned food that has expired or gone out of date, or maybe you know someone that does canning. If you don't do canning right, excuse me, this bacteria can be introduced and it can cause botulism. So the botulism toxin you can see in this graphic will actually block the release of acetylcholine. So this image is zooming into the presynaptic terminal of the motor neuron. And instead of that, those vesicles releasing acetylcholine, the botulism toxin actually blocks. Therefore, you're not going to get a muscle contraction. So it makes muscles not contract. The thing and the reason why I wanted to share this with you is that I'm sure you all have heard of Botox before. And I have to always laugh. People think Botox is this amazing thing to make you pretty, but Botox comes from the bacteria that causes botulism. If you think about what Botox does is it wants to smooth out wrinkles in your face. And basically what you're doing is you are injecting a toxic or a toxin from a bacteria into your face so that it smoothes out those wrinkles, which I think is just hilarious. All right, another common poison of the neuromuscular system is a poison called strychnine. So strychnine is a common ingredient in rat poisoning. And the reason why it works as rat poison is that it lowers the threshold level for an action potential, making it more likely that those muscles will contract. So if you had AP Bio and you remember action potentials and this idea of threshold, basically it means that all the muscles in the rat will be more likely to contract, and that rat will seize up and then die because of convulsions and asphyxia, which means they can't breathe. So strychnine is going to affect humans the same way. The next poison is a poison that is found naturally in poison dart frogs. There's a really cool video, again, that we'll save for another time that's posted here, where poison dart frogs, the poison that's on their skin, indigenous persons used to use that poison on the tips of arrows to actually fight and defend themselves. The poison that's on poison dart frogs is a poison called curare or curare. And the interesting backstory with this is that curare actually was one of the first anesthesias that we gave people during surgery. So they determined that if you have too much, it's going to kill you. But if you back it up just a little bit less than the toxic or fatal amount, it results in a coma-like condition where the patient goes to sleep and can't feel what is happening to them. So fun fact that curare actually helped us develop anesthesia. All right. So curare again helps by making the skeletal muscle not contract. All right, and that is the end of this lecture. We will come together one last time in this unit to talk about the joints of the skeletal system. Hope this was helpful.